all been focusing on the same little short part of Luke, Luke 4, verses 18 through 19. And on Christmas Eve, John will be sharing about that message as well, for his message. We're taking little pieces and focusing on a little piece and expounding upon it in ways that hopefully will be new and inviting and different for you. We've been using the NIV version each week, which is printed on the cards at your table. But this week, I'm also going to focus on the message. If you're not familiar with the message is a paraphrase of the Bible by Eugene Peterson, and he uses words sometimes that are a little different, that can encourage us to kind of look at something from a slightly different angle. So I've included both. I'm going to read from both also before we have our question this morning. And as I read this, I'd like us to remember that Jesus was saying these words in a synagogue in Nazareth, his hometown, to set the stage a little bit. And initially, when people heard these words, they actually were like amazed by them. But soon afterwards, they wanted to throw him off of a cliff. And to think about that as well, as we hear these words. So the first is from the NIV. The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight to the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. A slightly different version from the message. God's Spirit is on me. He's chosen me to preach the message of good news to the poor. Sent me to announce pardon to prisoners and recovery of sight to the blind, to set the burdened and battered free, to announce this is God's time to shine. This week, our focus is on setting the oppressed free. But as we listen to that word or hear that word, I'd like us to also think about Eugene Peterson's translation, the burdened and battered, to set the burdened and battered free. So before we do that, or as we're doing that, I'd like to take a few minutes at your tables, and for those of you who are new to Oak Brook, we have a little discussion each week before we have the message, and take a few minutes at your table and to talk about what does it feel like to be seen and heard when you are struggling. So if you can mix it up a little bit, maybe to gather some folks together at different tables, but what does it feel like to be seen and heard where you are struggling? Microphone. Everyone have some thoughts on what it feels like to be seen and to be heard when you're struggling? They're willing to share?
All right, Dan.
Dan?
Hey, I'll be happy to share. This weekend actually was a perfect example of this for us. We went through our walkthrough on Friday, and at our walkthrough, we found out that there was going to be a trail next to our house, and there was never supposed to be a trail next to our house. And one of the reasons we're moving to our house on a secluded cul-de-sac is that we won't have neighbors. We're not going to have people standing outside our home on cell phones at 9:30 at night talking, and I can verbatim give them the conversation. And all of a sudden I find, this, and let me tell you, the panic ensued. But we actually started reaching out. We reached out to Preeti's dad and talked to him about it. We reached out to our realtor and talked to her about it. We actually went and talked to our new neighbors yesterday and talked to them about it, and none of them knew anything about this trail. And it turns out that there's really not a bike path, but a wooded trail path. But by talking to everybody and being seen and heard, it calmed the waters. And if we didn't have those people to call and the neighbors to talk to and each other to talk to, it would have been very easy to ratchet up that pressure enough that we were telling them, no, we're not closing on Tuesday. Until you resolve this issue, we're not closing. But by talking to everybody and being seen and heard, it just was a perfect example for us of this.
Taking the pressure off. Thank you.
So immediately I think of the Hebrew word, I'll probably butcher it, but shema, to hear. But in the context of the scripture, when you see the word, it's around obeying God. So the translation is to hear, but it's really to hear, to obey, and to take action, all tied into one word. And so when I look at this, it's like, well, what's the difference between someone just physically listening to your problems and maybe not acknowledging it or not offering any action, and the person who offers empathy, offers a solution, support? That difference is that action.
Are there others?
I think the last statement, "you matter," is what shows up for me. For someone to see you and hear you means they're present for you, they're connecting to you, and also saying to you that you matter.
Are there others? You have basically done the whole sermon. As some of you know, the last few weeks I've been working through finals. So I've had a combination of multiple choice tests, which I honestly have not taken since maybe high school, projects and other types of tests and papers and things that have been filling my world for the last few weeks. And as I was going through all this, I was reflecting on what faith looks like and decided it absolutely does not look like a multiple choice test. It's not like A, B, C, D, or E, or all the above or none of the above. It is nothing like that. When we actually try to live it out in this world, that's not what it's like. It was never meant to be like that. And so often we feel that we have to fit our faith in a box. It has to be A, or it has to be B, or it has to be C or D. But that's not how it is, because that's not how life is. Life is not a multiple choice test. Well, sometimes it might be. But most of the time, it's not a multiple choice test where we pick A, B, C, D, or E, or all the above. It's far more complex. It's far more complicated. And the easy answers don't work. They simply don't work. Instead, it's more like total chaos sometimes. Things flying at us at breakneck speed, offshoots and answers and lightning bolts and things that just slam us. It also can be really quiet moments. Watching a butterfly. Walking with a toddler as they examine every bug and worm that happens to be on the sidewalk. The trickling of a stream. All the above and everything in between. Faith includes all of it. And why shouldn't it? God created all of that. It's all part of our world. A faith that fits neatly in a box cannot speak to all of those situations, as well as many more. And that is why we are called to be free. To be free to be all of who we are and all of who God has created us to be, because the multiple choice faith is not going to cut it in this world. It's too hard. It's too complicated. There's too much going on. Too much we might miss if we try to box it in. Our hearts, our minds, and our souls need to be free to love God with all of who we are and to love each other with all of who we are. Not just certain parts. Everything. All of us. And to live in this world that is authentic for us and for other people. And that is not easy, and there's no box that will do it. That's also why at Oak Brook, we want you to ask questions. It's part of learning and growing in faith. We want you to feel free to ask every question that comes on your heart and your mind. It's part of a genuine attitude or interest in learning to love God and to love others, to live like Jesus lived. Asking questions shows your mind is growing and expanding. You're digging deeper and you're wanting more. We want that. It's a good thing. We encourage it. We want you to feel free to ask questions because it's part of taking what we've learned in our brains and applying it to our actual lives. We can learn all kinds of stuff. I can spit out all kinds of stuff on a test, but actually doing it is different. Actually living it is different. It's not the same thing, and it was never meant to be. When you think about it, that's no different than any other part of our life. If you imagine starting a new job, and you couldn't ask questions. Well, you saw what the job description was. Don't you know what you're supposed to do? Well, maybe. Anyone who's a parent, I don't care how many books you've read, that first bath with a newborn is an adventure. Am I right? Anyone who's had teenagers, I don't care how many books you've read, you can throw them all out the window because the reality is they're teenagers. They haven't read the books. Or if they have, they're using them against you. Okay? So the reality of our life is that these things, it's not that they're not important. It's not that learning isn't important. It is. It's critical. It gives us a knowledge base. But taking what's here and living it is a whole different story. Studying about grief is not the same as grieving. Learning about addiction is not the same as battling it. There are many, many elements of our lives that we can learn something to the best of our abilities, but we need to live in community to live it out. We need to support each other to figure out, what do we do with this? How do we make it work? What does it look like? What does it seem like? What does it feel like? And we can't do it alone, and that means we're going to ask questions. Life requires us to think, to learn, to grow, to explore, to doubt, to wonder, to imagine, to do all kinds of things that are going to set our minds free. And questions are part of that. What we learn about God can swirl in our heads until we have opportunities to explore what living it out looks like. And every life is different. Every person in this room has had a very different experience. Every person in that world has had a very different experience. If God wanted us to be the same, He would have made us that way. He didn't. And so what that looks like in my life is going to be different than yours and every other person God has ever created. How could that not create questions? How could that create concern sometimes? What do I do? How do I do this? What does it look like? Jesus said that, but what does it mean for my life? She's doing this. Should I do that too? All of those questions are going to stir up, and that's okay. They're nothing to fear. It's part of life. The list of questions are endless, and God is infinite. Why shouldn't they be endless? Every one of us is different. God's all-powerful. He can handle anything. Of course we're going to have questions, and they're going to go on and on and on, and that's okay. We want your questions. They're important. You're going to have your own hopes, dreams, fears, and frustrations, high points and low points, and we're going to walk alongside you the entire time. Because that's what we do, especially when we do it well. Part of the challenge is allowing other people to ask questions as well and being comfortable with that. Their questions are not going to be our questions. They may ask questions that challenge us. They may ask questions that frustrate us. They may ask questions we wish they had the answers to. They may ask questions we don't have the answers to. They may say things that are really upsetting. It's nothing to fear. Think of all the questions Jesus was asked. A lot. A lot. God is greater than all of it. Every question, everything on our mind, everything that we're facing. And Scott mentioned a few weeks ago in his message that part of this idea is that we are carrying the good news to the world. This is part of carrying the good news, carrying the freedom for people to be all of who they are, their thoughts, their dreams, their hopes, their fears, their frustrations, and their questions. Every part of it. That's how we all learn and grow together. It's one way. Encouraging people to use all of who they are to live and love in relationship with God, as well as everything God has created, to set the oppressed free. You can be part of this process. We are all asked to be part of this process. Which brings us back to the passage. The word used for oppressed also could be translated as crushed and bruised. The exact word that Luke uses is also translated as broken by calamity. It's used one time in the entire scripture, and this is it. Broken by calamity. When we think in those terms, questions start to emerge. Often oppressed, we think of a small group. Well, that's not us. I'm not oppressed. I haven't experienced that. Have you ever been crushed? Have you ever been bruised? Have you ever felt broken by calamity? Maybe that you can relate to. Have you seen it in others? Possibly. I suspect you have. God gave us a brain. He expects us to use it, and part of that is a process. When we ask questions, they show that our brain is working. Questions show, when we ask a question, it literally lights up different parts of our brain. If we take an MRI of your brain when you're asking a question, it actually shows you're integrating different parts of your brain. You can't do it with just one little part. You've got to use everything. which is pretty cool when you think about it. God's literally asking us to use all of who you are, everything that's up there. Put it all together and spit the question out. And I'll give you an extreme example. And bear with me a little bit as I tell this story, if you don't mind, because there's a lot to it, but I think it gets a lot of this point. As some of you know, I have 4 children. My oldest is 27, Brianna, then Kayla, and then Jenna. And I have a son, Colin, who's 20. When my daughter Jenna was 12 years old, she had a massive concussion. She's the goalie of a travel soccer team. And she's right over playing in Hutchinson, where Rick knows pretty well. Hutchinson's a field in Herndon where lots of soccer games are played. And when Jenna went down to pick up the ball in the box to pick it up as a goalie, the best defender on her team went to drive the ball out of the box. And instead of kicking the ball, she kicked my daughter's head. I did not see the point of impact, which is probably a really good thing. And please remember, this was 10 years ago. Concussion protocols are nothing like they are now. She stayed in the game. Again, please hold your judgment. She stayed in the game until the other team scored 2 more goals with her just standing there, literally as the balls went past, because she had no idea what was happening. And then after 2 more goals were scored, she was taken out of the game. And here's where the Mother of the Year part comes in, and I'm not proud of this either. After the game, when I saw how dysfunctional my daughter was, please remember, 10 years ago, I thought, oh, maybe she needs to get something to eat. So we went to Taco Bell. I took my daughter, who had kicked in the head with blunt force, to Taco Bell to get a burrito. And as we're in the drive-thru, I asked her to pick out 8 cents for change because it was the time we still actually used money. I was holding a nickel. She needed to find 3 pennies in the cup holder. She couldn't count to 3. So we went from there to Reston Hospital, and had every test imaginable taken of my daughter, as you can imagine. Fortunately, Blaine wasn't breathing, all these kind of things, but they really couldn't figure out exactly what was happening. And after weeks of seeing multiple doctors, including concussion specialists, they still had no idea what was going on. She had slept for a week. She couldn't see. She couldn't read. She couldn't say the word plate. She would point when she wanted something because she couldn't actually say the words. It was awful. We needed one person who would change everything. We needed one person who would say, I hear you, I see you, you matter to me. We needed one person who would look beyond what was right in front of them and change our world, because all these specialists we had seen couldn't do it. So eventually we ended up at Children's Hospital. And when we arrived, we were told her test scores were so low they were not even measurable. But we found the one person. There was one doctor there who sat with my daughter and just talked to her and listened and could see things that nobody else could see and found the missing piece that changed everything for us. Absolutely everything. I see you, I hear you, you matter to me. One person changed our world. My daughter is now getting her master's in social work and thriving. She's doing incredibly well. But I'll tell you, as you can imagine, as a parent in that moment, I couldn't see that. I saw a horrific situation. I saw a child who was incapable of reading, speaking, doing basic things, could not ask or answer basic questions. That's all I could see. I needed someone who could see something different. I needed someone who could hold hope for me when I couldn't hold it for myself. I needed someone who said, look, I know what you see right now, but I have a new vision for you. I have a vision of your daughter healing and excelling in this world. I have a vision of your daughter doing incredibly well, which is exactly what has happened. But when she couldn't count to 3, there's no way I could see that. Someone had to hold it for me. Someone had to hold the hope that I couldn't hold. We all have situations like that. We all do. Your daughter hopefully will never get kicked in the head with, instead of a soccer ball. But you're going to have things in your life that are devastating. And these little boxes, fill in the box stuff, and multiple choice test faith, it doesn't work in those situations. It wasn't A, B, C, D, or E. But I still needed an answer. And the answer was one person who changed everything. And my hope, my prayer, is that we will learn to be that one person for others. That we will step out into this world, and we will be the ones who slow down. The ones who say, I see you, I hear you, you matter to me. I'm here, I'm listening, and I'm not going anywhere. in our world of total chaos, those people are few and far between. It's hard to find them. Even in the best of circumstances, it's hard to find those people who slow down and say, I see you, I hear you, you matter to me. But we all know what it looks like and feels like when they do. It changes everything. It changes everything in our lives. And so that is my hope. The other part of this is asking questions is an important component. We knew my daughter's brain was healing when she was able to ask and answer questions. That's how we measured it. Because initially the question was count to 3, and that answer didn't come up too well. Okay, we went from there to now thriving. But as her brain started working more and she was healing, the types of questions she was able to ask and answer became increasingly complex. And I want to suggest is the same is true with our faith. And as our faith is growing and we're digging deeper and we're exploring more and we're wondering and we're thinking and we're creating and we're imagining, our brains and our questions are going to get deeper and richer and more beautiful. And that's wonderful. We want that. We're not afraid of that. It's exciting. It's a great place to be for all of us. And your questions are going to spark questions in me, and my questions might spark some in you, and that's all good. And you might say something I've never heard before that's upsetting for me, and that's okay too, because that's part of the process. I didn't really want to hear everything that doctor said. She said some pretty rough stuff, okay? But overall, it was a hopeful, beautiful, amazing experience, an opportunity to see God's presence and God working in this world in ways that are beyond powerful, especially when I see my daughter now, and I know where we were before. And yes, I've asked. She knows this. I'm talking about that soon, just so you're aware. It's beautiful and amazing and rich and deep, incredible. Jesus understood that. Think about all the people who question Jesus. Jesus brings hope, healing, light, and promise into our world. He comes into the world as one who is vulnerable and remains vulnerable throughout his entire life. He's exposed to all of the challenges in the world that we have been exposed to. Nothing we ever face is more difficult than what Jesus faced. Ever. Ever. And that's so great to hold on to. That's a hope we can hold on to no matter what's happening in our lives. A beautiful hope. Through his vulnerability, Jesus shows us how to live through any challenge we may ever face. At Oak Brook, we want to hear what God is putting on people's hearts. We see you, we hear you, you matter to us. We want to know how you feel God is calling you to serve. We see you, we hear you, you matter to us. It's going to be different for every single one of you. We want to hear about God's calling you to see, to hear, to experience, to go through life differently than every other person in this room, because that's a beautiful thing. You were created to be different, and that's something to celebrate. We want to celebrate that. It's great news. That is good news alone. My hope and our prayer is that we'll do that for others as well. When we come alongside what God is doing in your life, your faith doesn't fit in a box. It's not a multiple choice test. It won't work that way. Blow open the boxes. Blow them open completely. Take who you are, who God's calling you to be, and see where that takes you. And we're going to run alongside with you. Taking the questions, challenging each other, exploring together, seeing where it leads, maybe going down a dead end and going someplace totally different because we realize, hey, that's not where we're supposed to be. But we tried it, and now we know, and that's okay. We had to go to an awful lot of doctors before we found the right one. A lot of doctors who didn't know before we found the one who did, who changed everything. And that happens in our life and in our faith often. We have to explore different things. We have to try different things. We have to see if it's a fit for us. And then say, yeah, this is and that isn't, and that's okay. Again, we're with you. As a church community, we're with you. Let's do it. Let's do it together. Let's see where it leads. And my hope and my prayer is that we will do that for others as well. Not just for us. This isn't something we hold on to at Oak Brook those who happen to be in this room right now. This is a gift. It's a gift we can give other people. I'm here for you. I see you. I hear you. You matter to me. That's an overarching theme in terms of all of what Jesus did. After he said these words in the synagogue, as we talked about, they wanted to run him off a cliff. But what did Jesus do? Perform one miracle after another. Boom, boom, boom. With all kinds of people who are hurting and desperate, broken and bruised. Saying, I see you, I hear you, you matter to me, not just with his words, but also with his actions. And that's what we're called to do. Not just with our words, but also with our actions. Taking what's here in our brains and living it out in our lives. That's what changes things. We'll create safe spaces to ask questions, to share our frustrations, to open our minds to hopes and dreams and imagination we never had before. And we can do that for other people, everywhere we go. That also involves slowing down, listening, and paying attention. Can we be a faith community that slows down in a world that's going at breakneck speed? Can we be a faith community that says, I've got time for you. You matter to me? Can we be a faith community that says, you know what? This is what's important and that isn't. Hey, I thought this was really important, but now I see that it's not. Can we think about those things? Can we be counterintuitive that way? Can we walk out into this world that we know is crazy with hustle and bustle and all kinds of ideas and be like, no, we're going to do it differently. I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to notice my neighbor who's struggling to take care of her yard or shovel her driveway. I see you. I'm going to listen to the mom who's battling cancer and doesn't know how to care well for her children. I hear you. I'm going to help out that child who struggles to make friends. You matter to me. It means intentionally slowing down, being fully present with all of who we are, and paying attention to all of who other people are. Jesus did that. He showed us how to do that well, to take the time to be fully present. It's not easy. Nothing about it is easy, but boy, is it amazing. Absolutely amazing. In a recent meditation, Richard Rohr quoted Mirabai Starr, who's an educator. He writes about mystics in different religious traditions. And these are her words about what this looks like when we do it well. In Starr's words, in mystical Judaism, this teaching is known as the mending of the world. How are we to do this? The answer is with every act of loving kindness and generosity. It means cultivating contemplative practice to nurture the divine in each of us, making an effort to welcome the stranger and care for the earth. It means bending close to listen for what it is our sisters and brothers on the margins might need, and being willing to forego our notion of what helping might look like, since our preconceived ideas of service often aren't very helpful. It means slowing down enough to let the pain of the world all the way into our hearts, allowing our hearts to break open and acting from that broken open space. It means stepping up with humility and curiosity and love. And I would add, also with questions, honest, heartfelt questions. My hope and my prayer is for Oak Brook to always be a place where people feel welcomed and loved, regardless of how many questions they may have. We will remember that this world is full of crushed, bruised, and broken people who are trying to take what they've learned in one way or another, and apply it to their actual lives. And that's not easy. People could walk through this door, we could put down a multiple choice test, that would be easy. Do you believe this? Do you believe that? Do you know this? Do you know that? Yep, you're good. But that's not life. It doesn't look like that. And anyone who's lived more than a few days knows that. Okay? So what I'm encouraging us to do is to get beyond that. Yes, these things are important to know and understand, but let's walk alongside each other and live it out. Let's see what that looks like and explore what that looks like, including all the questions, fears, doubts, and frustrations that come along with it. Every day we have opportunities to come alongside the work God is already doing in other people's lives. It's already there. God is present. They are his children too. So let's see what he's up to. Let's check it out. Let's explore. We have opportunities to say, I see you, I hear you, you matter to me, with all of who we are, just as Jesus did. Those miracles, yes, it's great he performed miracles. But part of the miracle was being seen. You noticed me. You care about me. You want to hear my story. I matter to you. For a group of people who didn't have that kind of experience, as well as individuals who did not have that experience, the unseen, the unheard, the invisible, for all kinds of reasons. The miracle isn't just a physical healing. The miracle is you matter. You matter to me and you matter to God. And I'm going to make that clear. You matter to both of us. You matter to all of us. And we're going to make that clear. Every person in this room is a child of God. We know that. We love that. We want to celebrate that. And every person out there is a child of God. Oh, them too. Yeah. The ones who challenge us. Yeah. The ones who make life hard. Yeah. The ones we love deeply. Yeah. Everybody. So how do we take this and live it not just in this faith community, but out there in the world with people who don't see the world the way that we do? Let's do it together. Let's figure it out. Let's ask lots of questions, learn, grow, and explore all together. This Christmas season, my hope and my prayer is that we'll let ourselves love as Jesus loves. We'll pay attention to those who are hurting. We'll ask lots of questions. We'll see people, hear them, and make it clear they matter to us. And in doing so, we will help set the oppressed free. Earlier, we talked about God's kingdom. Eric talked about God's kingdom being here on earth. We help bring it. Bring it on. Bring it on. We help bring it through our actions, living the life that Jesus called us to live, the life he modeled for us. Let's do it. This Christmas, let's do it. Let's make a real effort to slow down, pay attention. I see you, I hear you, you matter to me. Let's pray. Lord, it is a great joy to be in a place that doesn't fear questions, that welcomes them, that invites them, that sees the power of your presence in our brains growing and learning and sharing, the wisdom that you impart in each of our hearts, wisdom to share, opportunities to love on each other and the world out there. Please help us follow Jesus' lead, to pay attention to those who are crushed or bruised, broken by calamity, or simply living life in ways that may be hard for us to understand. May we walk out into this world, Lord, with a heart for you, a love for each other, and the grace of God. Amen.